This edition of the Toby Talks podcast is a discussion with Dr. Doan Winkel. Dr. Winkel is the head of the Entrepreneurship department at John Carroll University. We talk about a number of different topics concerning entrepreneurship, including creative problem solving, how to start a small business, how to come up with ideas, how to finance these ideas. We also talk about AI in the context of an entrepreneurship in a college student, why doing less can be more as a college student, the issues of college education today, and how we can solve those issues. Be very grateful for your like and your subscription. Thank you very much, and enjoy this episode with Dr. Doan Winkel. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Winkel. I really appreciate your time. I thought we could start off with maybe explaining your career, who you are, your role here at John Carroll.
Sure. No, thanks for having me. So essentially I lead the entrepreneurship program. So I have a lot of fancy titles they give me, but so I'm a professor here. I teach some of the classes, but then I'm responsible for all the programs that we do, for the entrepreneurship program. And I've been a student and I've been in school. I tell people I've been in school since I was 5, so I never really left. I went straight through and got my PhD and always wanted to teach. Because I didn't have a good experience as a student, and so I wanted to kind of change things, and I knew the best way to change it is to get on the inside, and kind of work from the inside. So after not enjoying the first 12 years of school, I did another 12 so I could get here. But it's been a fun journey. I've been, I think, doing some good stuff and having some good impact, and I enjoy it because I get new students every semester, and it's always like fresh ideas, fresh blood. So it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool gig.
You bring up like you didn't have a very good experience as a student. What do you think needs to change about education in general that you've seen and that you've applied? We got all the time you want.
I hear you. I think the big thing, part of why I didn't enjoy myself or didn't enjoy the experience, and I think one of the things I see changing a lot, and with your generation, you're kind of insisting on this a lot more, is like, why am I learning this, right? And how do I use the knowledge or the skills I'm learning in a career, right? So you have that different kind of focus of, okay, I'm here now, but I kind of need this job afterwards. And so while I'm here, how is what I'm doing and learning and stuff applying it to that and helping me there, right? So to me, that's the biggest part, right? It's good to learn. Right. It's good to grow, right? There's nothing wrong there, but like, if you don't have some reason for it, or if you don't understand, and when you're 18, 19, I wasn't mature enough to kind of figure this out on my own, and most people at that age aren't. And so you're just kind of going where people direct you and going with the flow, right? So it's kind of our job, I think, to be able to translate things and say, here's what I need you to learn from this class or this discipline or whatever, and here's why it matters. Right. And stay relevant. So a lot of times stuff gets kind of outdated. Right. You know what I mean? And trying to update and keep relevant. And it's not easy to do. It takes work, right? I think that's our job.
So when we kind of bring up staying relevant, using what we use here in college to help us in our future careers, one of the topics I think that we were going to talk about is leveraging college for, career success. Yeah. Like, what are some strategies that students can use? How can we use what we're learning here in our short 4 years to apply to the rest of our lives?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, spending time with faculty, and whether it's in a classroom or, talking to them outside of a class, and really diving into, in your major, right? Like, okay, I'm trying to get into a career doing X, Y, Z, right? And what can I be learning to prepare for that? And, in this class on whatever, right? Like, how does that really apply here? So if the teacher isn't kind of proactively doing that, I think our doors are always wide open. Some of us are scarier than others maybe, but, our doors are always wide open. And at least here in this institution, we love helping students, right? And so I think taking the initiative to go talk to professors and really dive into it, in one-on-one based on the particular class you're in, any professor is going to help kind of translate some things if they're not doing it,
Right.
already in the class.
Yeah.
So I think that's one. And then the other thing is networking, to make it
Yes.
simple, right?
Mhm.
But using alumni, using LinkedIn, using all these kind of tools, again, to kind of say, here's what I want to do. Let me find some people who do those. So, so it's alumni and LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
And so engaging with them, figuring out, here's what I want to do post-college, here's the kind of job I want, finding people who do that and just talking to them, right? And again, it can be talking to faculty here and saying, hey, who are some alumni I could talk to? Because a lot of alumni stay in touch, right? Or going on LinkedIn and searching and finding John Carroll alum who do the kind of thing you want to do and reaching out to them. They're happy to talk to people, right? And very few students do that.
Yes.
And so when students do, I mean, it makes them feel good, because essentially what you're saying is, I want to be like you.
Right.
Who doesn't like that
Right.
sort of ego stroke?
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? And so those aren't complicated, right? And so just simple things like that, I think, can help students understand, if they want to choose this career path, help them understand what is that really like? What might that look like? Because you're learning knowledge here and you're learning skills here, but you're not necessarily learning, here's what the actual jobs using those skills look like.
Yes.
Right? So you're not getting that in class. Like, that's not kind of what we do in a classroom. And so again, it's taking the initiative to kind of bridge that on your own, and the faculty and LinkedIn are the best tools students can have to do that.
You mentioned networking and LinkedIn. Do you think you always had like that come naturally to you? Because I know for a lot of students and just people in general, it's kind of hard to be that person that reaches out and to get good at it and to be good at those social interactions and to use confidence in those ways, because I think those are first impressions are very important.
Yep.
Have you always been pretty good at that? Did you have to practice it? How do people get better at it? What are some steps like students can take in that way?
Yeah, I think, no, I wasn't always good at it, right? And I mean, to your point, I think at a young age, it's not natural, right? It's a scary thing to approach people and have these conversations and cold call and all that kind of thing. So there's a skill to it, and so like any skill, it's just practicing it. When you first do it, kind of suck at it, just like anything, right? Any skill. So you got to do it and you got to practice at it. And that's why if you start approaching professors, right, that's like a warm connection. And so you kind of start talking to them and you get used to talking about jobs and talking about life after college and that kind of thing. And then you kind of start approaching alum. Again, they're friendly, right? They're this sort of warmer connection, right? Where there's this shared...
There's a connection.
Yeah, they got this shared experience and they're going to be excited to talk to you and all that kind of thing. And then, the other thing I always encourage young people is get feedback. So when you have an interaction, ask people...
That's a really good point.
Like, how did that go? What did how can I improve in doing this? Whether it's in, there are better ways that I could reach out to people, or are there better ways I could, have asked better questions or anything like that.
Right.
Maybe they don't want to give you feedback, and that's fine. But if they're not going to volunteer it, right? So if you don't ask for it, you're not going to get it. And so I think it's just that combination of practicing it and just keep doing it and getting the feedback as you're doing it.
Right.
And, and you kind of pick up on, that didn't really go so well, right? As you do it. And that's hard. I mean, it's not comfortable when you're in those scenarios. But it's just putting yourself in those places.
Yeah.
And I think what college students will find is when you go into spaces and when you start trying to network with professionals, most professionals really enjoy talking to young people and sharing with young people about the kind of things they do, right? And so they want to open the door and they want to have those conversations, right? But you just got to get in the right spaces to do that. And again, that's part of where the faculty and staff members and stuff at the school can help with, check out this community organization, or here's events coming up, you should go to these things or whatever.
How much do you think a student in today's world, someone who's in college maybe is thinking, like for me, for example, I'm pre-med, so I want to be a physician. That's my future career. But applying entrepreneurship to all aspects of careers in students, I think I think we're becoming a time in society where you have to pick up something else. And I think entrepreneurship opens up so many avenues for so many different people.
Yeah.
Could you explain maybe a bit the importance on entrepreneurship today and why you would encourage people to find that in themselves to do?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So my perspective on entrepreneurship is it really all boils down to problem solving, right?
Yes.
And so I don't care what you do for your career. I don't care what community organizations you're a part of, nonprofits you volunteer for, churches you're whatever. It's all about problem solving, right?
Yeah.
And it's all about figuring out how do I create and capture value. End of the day, that's what any business, any organization needs to do, and the best way to do that is to solve problems for customers, right?
Yeah.
And so the skills with that approach, right? So we don't necessarily take the approach of entrepreneurship is about starting businesses. Like, we have kids who do that, and we have resources to help kids do that. But it's more about, if we take this problem-solving approach, it works for the students who want to start businesses, or they have a side hustle and they need to scale it. Like, that approach and those skills we teach work for those kids, but also for the kids who are like, I don't want to do that. I'm going to go, I'm going to be a physician, or I'm going to go work for an accounting firm, or whatever. If they're good problem solvers, they're going to find some success in their career path, right? And so it's just thinking about like, who are customers, right? And how do you find them, and how do you get information from them, and how do you use that information to sort of prototype some things and experiment with some ideas and that kind of thing, right? And so it's these skills that just are valuable no matter what scenario you're painting, in a professional world. So in that context, it's important for everybody, I think, and it sets you apart, because I think a lot of college students, a lot of young people don't get a lot of training in those kind of skills.
They don't.
Yeah.
And I can attest to that.
Yeah. And it just, it's valuable, right?
Yeah.
No matter what. And if you can start to put together that kind of toolbox where you have some of those skills, you're just more marketable.
Right.
And to me, that's the ultimate goal, right? You're here, students come to a college, you learn, you grow, that's great. But ultimately, the whole point of being here is so you can get a job.
Yes.
Or whatever the next step is, get a job, go to grad school, med school, whatever. And so getting that experience and learning those skills that's going to help you achieve that outcome should be what we do.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, because what you just said, when you just said, like, these are not skills that young people and students are taught.
Yeah.
And that's very true. And I think, like, when I can see it in a lot of people that I know, where they're not really thinking that way. They're kind of kind of trained to think a certain way for their specific job, and not to think outside the box, or to have those creative problem-solving thoughts and be able to apply that to themselves. I think that is a very important thing. When we talk about networking, and I know this is a situation, or this is an issue, a scenario that me and some of my friends have run into when thinking we have an idea, we like our idea, we think we would do well with it. But then now the problem is we're not experts on that idea.
Sure.
We don't know how to make whatever, like whether if it's technology or if it's like production or whatever, etc., how to market it, whatever. And then we run in that issue of, like, there's the blockage of, okay, we have an idea, we feel pretty good about our idea, we know that it works because, we see how it applies to the world and how it can solve a problem.
Yeah.
But now what the problem is, we need the networking to do that.
Yep.
How do you get past that make that jump there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's big.
Yeah, it's a big jump.
It's a big jump, and it's not easy to do. I think for college students, I'm biased, but one of the first steps is find that kind of entrepreneurship program and really engage with those people, because usually what happens is they have resources to help with that.
Yeah.
There might be some monetary resources to help get some supplies, or whatever the needs are. But more importantly, they're the ones who are really connected to other people who are building products and services, right? So like when alumni who are entrepreneurs and founders and people doing this kind of work, when they want to engage with the university, one of the places they want to engage is the entrepreneurship area, because that's what they do, right? And similarly, like I said before, they're excited to talk to young people who want to do these things, right? But they don't have the time to hunt students down, right? But if students approach them, eventually they might be busy, so it might take a while, but eventually they're going to take time and they're going to talk to you and they're going to share their experience. So, I think that's one easy way if there is an entrepreneurship program. So that's part of what we offer students here. And so that's one avenue. And then I think the other avenue is just, again, it's part of that, like finding people on LinkedIn, or finding, if there are certain meetups in a community, right, where those kind of people get together, right? If there's networking groups, or if there's events for that kind of a thing, and doing some research and finding those kind of things in the community and then going to them, or figuring out, how do I become a part of that group, or how do I get access to that event or something like that, right? And again, part of entrepreneurship program or other people at a university can kind of help students navigate that, right? In terms of evaluating, like, is this going to be a good use of my time with this group or with this event? What do you think, kind of thing. So, you don't have to kind of go it alone. You can get a little bit of guidance.
Yeah. A lot of the things that we've talked about so far are action steps into like doing something. And, they can be difficult and complex for a lot of people and stressful. One of the things when we were emailing back and forth that you wanted to talk about, I thought was very interesting, is why doing less is sometimes more. And now we just had this discussion where it seems like it's a lot.
Yep.
So maybe we can go into that, because now I feel like it's pretty interesting where we are with that.
Yeah. So all of that stuff, finding professors, talking to professors, going on LinkedIn, finding network opportunities in the community, it all takes time.
Yes.
Right. And so part of what I see generationally is your guys' generation, you do a lot.
Yeah.
You commit to a lot of things, and it's this major and a couple minors and this club, and you got this job or internship. So you have all these things going on, and so part of it is there's two. The way I see it, there's two problems with that. One is there's not a lot of flexible time, right? Or there's a perception that there's not a lot of flexible time. So when these opportunities come up, it's harder to say yes to them because you're so scheduled. You got so many things you got to do, right? And so it's hard to be like, oh, somebody approached me, and I do it all the time, right? I talk to students and I go, hey, here's this event, or here's this person you should talk to. And they just have a hard time saying yes to that because they say yes to so many other things, right? So one is just having the bandwidth and being able to manage time a little bit to allow yourself the freedom to have time to do those kind of things, because I would say in many ways that's more valuable time spent than some of the other things. People don't really need to have 2 or 3 minors, right? People might argue with that, right? But it's, you kind of look at it and you go, what's the value of that versus doing this kind of work to connect with people and build this network in a career path? I would say the latter is more valuable, right? So there's that. And then the other thing is, if you do so much stuff, you're essentially half-assing everything.
Yeah.
That doesn't...
You can't put 100% in everything.
Right.
It's physically
you're
possible.
Stretched too thin, right? And so then what happens is you're not kind of doing your best in anything, and maybe you're doing fine, but you're not really doing your best in anything, and you're not really devoting and kind of really diving into things. And so to your point of that impression, right, you're not necessarily making the best impression because you're kind of just showing up, right?
Yes.
Whereas if you do fewer things and you can really give yourself to that, you're making a much better impression on the people involved in that because you're really showing up with like your whole self, right? And then just like mental health, like it's just stressful. You guys are like these bundles of anxiety, and a big part of it is because you're doing so much. And how do you juggle it? And for the most part, I didn't have it at 18, 19. Like you don't have the skills to balance.
You think there's a really stark difference between how like we handle our time as young people today versus when you were our age? Like how much of a difference is that?
For me personally, right?
Yeah.
And there's different groups and all this kind of thing, but I kind of jokingly say that with my generation, the whole point in college was to do as little as possible. And then with you guys, it's to do as much as possible, right? But it was, I know what I got to do to get the goal I'm trying to get, right? And everybody's different. I need to get certain grades, or I need to have certain experiences. I need to get internships. I need to study abroad, whatever it might be, whatever the things that you value are. But then, great, do that, meet the bar, do what you want to do, right? But then be able to evaluate these other experiences. Is this thing really going to help me get where I want to go in my career? Is this joining this club going to do that? Is taking on this other minor going to do that? Is this internship going to do that? And if you have that sort of decision criteria, right?
Have a more focused vision.
Yeah. And as opportunities come your way, that's kind of what you can gauge things on, right? And if something seems interesting, but it's not really going to help you there, I mean, it's ultimately your decision, right? But then you have to understand, if you choose to do this and it doesn't really help you here, then you're going to have a hard time getting here because you're devoting time to this other thing, right? So it's just choices. But yeah, I mean, I think I think there's a big generational difference between this and I could have done more, right? So, there's a balance, right? I mean, people of my generation and or at least my friends, we could have done more and been more engaged. Your generation could do less and be more flexible.
What do you think caused that? Like, do you think there was
I think
a
it's
culture?
our fault. Yeah. I think
Really?
because I think it goes in cycles, right? Like my parents' generation was like, do it all, right?
Yes.
Work ethic and just right? And so I think when they had kids, they kind of looked at it and they're like, oh man, maybe that wasn't the right way to do it. And so they kind of encouraged their children, like, don't do so much, just like chill out a little bit, have some fun, right? So that was my generation, and we were like, cool, we're gonna take that to an extreme, right? And so then we have kids and we grow up and we're like, okay, that maybe wasn't the best decision. So then we encourage, like, get involved, do things, this and that, right? So I think it's just a cyclical. So I think when your guys' generation gets to the point of raising children,
we're gonna be like,
because you're gonna look at it and you're gonna be like, oh man, that was that was stressful, and I maybe could have taken it easy a little bit, right? So you're gonna encourage your children. Maybe they'll, So I think it just kind of goes in cycles.
Very interesting. Yeah. Do you think it was harder to be an entrepreneur when you were coming up or now?
No, it's much easier now.
It's much easier now.
I guess for the most part it's easier. It's easier now because the opportunities are so much. There's so many more opportunities, and with technology and everything, there's so much more possibility, right?
Yeah.
And so,
I think it's more accessible now
exactly.
to be one.
Yeah, and so when I was 30
but I do
years
think
ago,
you guys had more like ideas available. It was easier to come up with it.
Yeah. It and I think it just was there's probably less competition in that way. You know what I mean? Just because it wasn't. I don't want to say it's easy, but it wasn't as easy then because we didn't have a lot of the technology and a lot of the opportunities that are readily available now.
I mean, like with this podcast, like if I couldn't start this podcast 10 years ago, like everything goes through my phone. Like we have a CapCut. Right. CapCut wasn't a thing. CapCut makes it seem like you used to have to buy like Adobe and all these like editing softwares. Yeah. But CapCut makes everything simple. It does everything that Adobe does, and it's right on your phone. Right. Yeah. So like even now, like with just different technological advancements, it's just made it so much easier for people to start things like podcasts or go into like different business ideas or set up, like drop shipping and online marketing and all that stuff is just so much easier now. And on top of that, in the last 2 years, we've gotten into this whole AI thing, and AI has just I mean, I know it's helped saved me a bunch of time on a
Yeah.
bunch of different things in my life, and I use it. I encourage other people to use it.
Yeah.
How can students and entrepreneurs use this in their daily routines? How can they apply it to their lives?
Yeah.
What is the significance of AI today?
Yeah. Well, I think it's huge. It's disrupting a lot of things in the sense that it's causing people to have to kind of rethink how they do things and why they do things, right? And the way that I approach it, and that I encourage people to approach this, is if you sit down in whatever role in your life you're looking at, whether if it's a student or if it's I'm running a company or trying to find a job, whatever the role is, right? If you sit down and you literally make two lists and you go, okay, in that role, so as a student, for instance, in that role as a student, here are sort of the low value tasks. I need to do them, but they don't really do a lot, right? It's just like, I got to check this box, right? And then there's the high value tasks. These are the things of like, man, if I could do more of this stuff, I'd be golden, right? So that's like more of the networking, more of that kind of thing would be high value tasks, right? So then what happens is you look at these low value tasks and you go, okay, how can this technology help with some of those things, right? So if it's helping with classwork, right?
Sure.
That kind of thing.
A
right?
discussion board, hypothetically.
Yeah.
let's say.
And not saying that doesn't have any value, but it's like, okay, if this can help you be more efficient in accomplishing that, why not use it? Right? We don't do long division anymore.
Yeah.
We don't need to do that. We have tools that help us do that, right?
Yeah.
And so this is just another iteration of that kind of thinking. Of the internet came out. It changed everything, right? It opened up this whole world. Now this thing's here, same thing, right? It's new, so it's not perfect and it's got problems, but it really is able to help take a lot of the work off the table, and allow people to focus their time and energy a little differently, right?
Yeah.
So like in business, let's say, I got to do all this marketing, right, for these products and services that I'm developing.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'm not great at marketing.
Yes.
Maybe I need to focus more on the numbers, right? So now what I can do is I can use some of these AI tools to help me make the marketing function much more efficient. Why would I not do that?
Yeah.
Right? And it takes time and it takes work to learn these tools and to kind of master these tools, but it's an investment that I think pays off, right? If I can spend the time learning this so that I can really minimize my time spent on the marketing function, but it's still effective, that's a good investment in my time, long term, right? So it's just things like that. And again, it's taking a step back and looking at what are all the tasks I have to do in this particular role, and which of those tasks can I kind of offload most of the work onto some of these AI tools. And that's just experimenting. It's trying it out, right? And going like, okay, I want to work on discussion boards. I want to see, can one of these tools help me with some discussion board posts? I don't know, try it out. See what works for you, experiment with it.
Yeah.
It's similarly to earlier we were saying, is it's a skill. The only way you get better at a skill is to try it and keep practicing.
Do you remember when you were like, what your original thoughts were when like you heard about like ChatGPT and this coming to universities? Like, did you have already know it was coming? Because I feel like a lot of professors and just people in the university in general kind of caught off guard by it. Like I remember I saw like a TikTok of this AI that does like your schoolwork, and I looked it up and I was like playing around with it. I was like, what is going on? Like, it's an insane tool to think about, like this language model. And I use it for almost everything in my life now. I help it with my daily routines. I help it learn, like I will explain, like I have like pages on it where explain this crypto coin to me like I'm dumb, and it'll just give me a description. And it's just like my new Google. Like instead of like, I'm a very curious person. So sometimes I'd be like, who is the Caesar salad like named after? And I look it up on Google. I don't even need to use Google anymore. I just ask ChatGPT. And I apply it to almost everything in my life. But I just want to know, like, did you know this was coming? Did you know, like?
I did.
Did you?
Yeah. I mean, I knew I have a business that's sort of an ed tech business and a curriculum, and so I'm not a tech guy, but part of the founding team or some tech guys, and so kind of had some ideas of this stuff, right, that was out there. And then a couple other colleagues of mine that I connected with on LinkedIn, they had seen it before it came out, and they were part of some groups that were testing some things out. So I kind of had a sense. I at least knew the language, right? I knew that this thing was coming. I didn't know what it really was or what it could do or anything like that. And I'm the type of person where this new stuff comes out and I go, ooh, I'm gonna play with this new tool and see, and
I was the same way.
Yeah, and so as soon as it did, I was just all over it. And I spend hours every day using it, playing around with it, experimenting, all that kind of thing. So,
did you find any like unique uses for it that not a lot of people may know about?
I don't know that I did really. I just, because what I didn't necessarily approach it like that, right? I approached it more to say, how can it help me be more efficient in the things I do?
Yeah.
Right? That's like always been my approach to it. Okay. And so I haven't necessarily looked for, here's all these unique things, right? Like I'll play around this new, I see this new one on LinkedIn or whatever. And I'm like, oh, what's that? That's kind of interesting. But I don't really play with stuff, right? Because unless I think it's useful to help me accomplish something. Right. There's all this crazy like video stuff now.
Yeah, right? And it's insane.
Yeah, like
I can't even sometimes you can't even tell.
Right. Yeah. Right. And like I don't do that. I don't need that for what I do, so I don't really mess around with that too much. But if I would, I'm sure it'd just blow my mind at what it can do.
Yeah. So here's my concern with like young people using AI. My concern is that so many kids now are becoming so used to using AI that the AI does the thinking for them rather than them doing the thinking.
Yep.
What I try to do with AI and what I what I say is I don't want AI to do the thinking for me. I want AI to take my thoughts and translate them for me. And I think that's an issue that a lot of kids are having, because I think those are some of those skills that we learn in school without AI. Like, I think we're losing some of them as young people, and I think that's going to hurt. If you're trying to be an entrepreneur and creative problem solver, now you have AI to do most of the thinking for you. So are you really becoming this problem solver?
Yeah.
No, AI is the problem solver.
Right.
So where does that leave entrepreneurs here, and how can an entrepreneur adapt to that?
Right. Yeah. No, there's definitely some problems with it, right? And I think it comes down to the faculty. Really, you guys are at a place where sort of the more influential people are faculty, right? We are seen as the experts, and we are seen as like, well, these people know this stuff, and they're teaching us this stuff, right? And so I think it's our responsibility, is my perspective. I think it's our responsibility to try to help students figure out, like, how do we use these tools, right? So that you're not using them in an irresponsible way, or you're not using them in a way that kind of replaces some of those skills, that make us human and make us who we are, right? And I think it's the kind of way that you said you were using it, right? And looking at it and thinking, okay, this thing is just a thought partner.
Yes.
That's really, it's got all this information. Now, that information is very biased, right? There's privacy concerns, there's environmental concerns with this. So there's all these issues that, again, like, we got to talk about. And if the faculty are not talking about this and bringing this up and encouraging some dialogue around these things with students, where else do you go for that?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And so that's my approach, and that's why I try to engage students and talk about how do we use these, in classes or whatever. It's cool. You want to come up with ideas? Awesome. Here's a tool that might be able to help you.
Yeah.
It can't replace it. I mean, people think it can. Some people might think it can, but it can't, right? Don't let it replace that part of you, but use it as a partner to think through some things.
So you said people think that they can't replace, like it can replace you, but it can't.
Yeah.
Do you think like entrepreneurs should be concerned about AI? Will AI become a better entrepreneur than a human can, or is there just a human element to it that makes an entrepreneur an entrepreneur?
Yeah, no, there's absolutely a human element, right?
Yeah.
Part of it is rational thinking, right? And, I get these questions a lot of like, where do you think it's going to be in 5 years or 10 years?
Yeah.
I don't know. I have no idea. Like, I don't know, right? Where it is now and some of the things I'm seeing on the horizon, like, we are rational thinkers. It is not, right? So that's one. And then just the human element of having relationships and engaging in conversations, right? And being able to build that network and all those kind of things that people have to do. Like, yes, maybe it can help with that. It can help think through, what's a better way to send this email, right? Or craft this email. Sure. What's a better way to write this cover letter, right? It can help with those kind of things, but it can't do this.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so it can be a tool, just like the internet's a tool, just like, smartwatch is a tool or whatever, but it can't replace those unique things that make us human.
So
currently. So
for entrepreneurs, what do you think is a development or a specific niche, like product or service or whatever, that you think we're going to be seeing like a lot of successful entrepreneurs coming from going forward? Because I think right now it's probably AI. I think before that, EV cars maybe, and then we have the cell phone, and then the internet. Where do you think we're going from here? Like, which industry do you think we're going to see some very successful entrepreneurs coming from?
Yeah, I think, one thing that's interesting is sort of this notion of building community. And it's, industry agnostic, but it's people who are leveraging AI, social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, and they're building communities around specific interests, really small niches. Yeah. And they build these communities and they have, let's say, a newsletter, right? And you're paying $5 a month to get access to this newsletter that's very niche, right? Well, 1,000 people are doing it, 5,000 people, 10,000 people. So I'm growing this community of people that I'm sharing my expertise with, right? A lot of people are making a lot of money doing this. Yeah. And again, because of all this technology, it's not that difficult to do. It's difficult to develop the expertise. It's not difficult to kind of implement the processes to do this, Right. So I think that's one big thing I'm seeing, and that I think will continue to grow. And I think in terms of industries, I think education is going to be a big one that's going to get really kind of disrupted by this. Healthcare, maybe. I don't know a lot about healthcare, but I keep reading a lot of things where just some of the technology and thinking through like all of the like the testing and the reading of X-rays and the development of kind of new products and that kind of a thing. Yeah. I think there's a lot of potential, like in that industry. Yeah. Manufacturing, they've been doing, robotics and all this kind of machine learning for a long time, and just keeps going. So I think it's going to kind of touch any industry, really. And it has the potential to really, really disrupt almost any industry, I think, because it helps humans be more efficient. Yeah. Yeah. That changes the game.
So we have an entrepreneur here. What do you, and I'm sure you could share many stories about starting businesses and such. Yeah. What are some key aspects and challenges of starting a business? How would you advise someone who wants to start a business? How do we get there to where maybe you are right now, where you kind of probably have it all handled and figured out?
No, definitely not. But so I think, one of the things is, well, three things, I guess. One is, it has to do with purpose, right? So like if you want to go down this road of trying to launch something, it's a really difficult road. It's a really drastic roller coaster, right? Ups and downs, and it's not an easy thing to navigate.
What makes it difficult, do you think?
Well, because you have to invest so much of yourself, time-wise, maybe money, right?
Yes.
And so you just are so invested in this thing, and it takes a long time. So you're not seeing rewards quickly, right? Which we like to do nowadays. And there's a lot of negatives. There's a lot of failures. There's a lot of things that don't go right, and that's hard to deal with, right? That's a hard thing to do. And so if you can identify sort of purpose, part of what's your purpose, right? What lights you up, those kind of things, right? And then you can identify that kind of a niche, right? If you can work in that space, you're just going to be a little more motivated, and you're going to be able to handle the downs a little better because it's something that's really meaningful to you, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is, and this is hard for a lot of people, is they kind of, they come up with, and they're like, ooh, here's this cool idea, right? Which is fine.
Yeah.
But what they forget to do is to say, how does this really solve a problem for somebody or for some group of people? Who are those groups of people? And doing that work to say, your idea may just suck. It may just be a bad idea, right? You may think it's cool, great. The market doesn't, right? And so what happens to a lot of people is they're like, I have this cool idea, and I'm going to invest all this time and money and whatever building this thing. And then I'm going to try to say, hey, market, here's this thing, right? That's a really bad way to do it.
Right.
Instead, it's, I got this idea, cool. What problem does it solve, and who has that problem, right? And so going that route, because then you're going to be a little more certain, because you have some validated learning, that this thing actually might be useful and be something that somebody's going to pay you for, right? And then the third thing is the people you work with. So you can't do any, well, most people can't do anything on their own, right? You got to have some people, complementary skills, other resources, whatever. And so finding people who you vibe with, right? And finding people who you have a shared purpose, or if you don't have the same purpose, at least you're clear on what it is, right? Maybe one of you is just like, I just want to make a bundle of money. And another one is, I want to change the world. Well, those two things can go together, but they need to understand where each one is.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And like figure out, well, this is how this thing helps you accomplish yours, and you accomplish yours. And so I think the people at the end of the day really make the difference.
I totally agree. I think, something I try to explain to some people that I know is like, you're in a competition. Life's a competition, and people are working together. If you're working solo, you're going to be at a disadvantage. Find people that you trust, find people that share the same purpose as you do, and do it together. There's no reason to go solo here, because you're going to lose. If someone else is working in a group, you're going to lose. So I think that is a very important point. Something I've always wondered, and have had conversations with my own friends about, is that if you have an idea, let's say, and you really believe that it's going to do well, how do you finance it? What's the best way to finance an idea?
Yeah. I would say there's not really one right answer to this. So I mean, a lot of it obviously depends on how much funding you need. Right? Do you need $1,000 to get started on a newsletter kind of business, or do you need $5 million to manufacture and right? Like those are just apples and oranges. They're just different, right? So part of it is it's very dependent on what are you doing, right? If you're making a physical thing, you need more money,
right,
than if you're setting up some digital products or something like that. Part of what I say is, if you do that work that I was talking about beforehand to kind of validate, is this a problem? Do people have this problem and want it solved? And who are those people? You can set things up where you can work on like a pre-order kind of basis, right? So this is like a Kickstarter model,
Sure.
right? Where, hey, I've got this thing, do you want to pre-order it? So if I develop this thing, would you pay for it?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that way you're using their money to finance
Exactly.
what you're doing,
Yeah.
right? So that's kind of one way. Friends and family is always an option, right? Of, you know, making the pitch, here's what I'm doing, here's what I need, here's why, here's, you know, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
That can get a little sketchy sometimes.
Yeah.
Bring family and business together.
Yeah.
But a lot of people do it, right? And then if people need a lot more money, it's going to angel investing groups or VCs or whatever, and then
Yeah.
that becomes a lot more formal.
Yeah.
You know, you got to have the numbers, you got to have the team in place, all that kind of stuff. So it just really depends on what the thing is.
Yeah. With your own experiences with VCs, like how would you describe that process and the stresses of it?
So I've never gone through it.
Really?
I stay away
Yeah.
from that.
Yeah. Why do you stay away from it?
Well, number one is I don't. You know, we don't need that money. Like
Sure.
we're not. That's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
what we're really trying to
Right,
do. So
sure,
we don't
sure.
really need it. But, you know, I think it's a. It seems to be, you know, from my understanding, it's a complicated process,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you're trying to convince people to take a really big risk on you,
Yeah.
and ultimately that's what they're doing is they're investing in the team, right? There needs to be numbers, there needs to be some traction, all that kind of thing. But ultimately, they're investing in like, can you, team, pull off what you say you're doing, right? And so it's just a really sort of complex conversation,
Yeah.
building relationships, developing trust, all that kind of thing, right? And then I think it's just uber stressful because
Yeah.
now you got somebody's money on the line,
Yeah.
right? You got to deliver, and now you have a different voice in your company, right? So you're bringing in these people who maybe have different goals and objectives,
Yeah.
right? And that might change the culture, and that might impact how you do things.
Right.
So it's not good or bad. Again, you know, individual choices of what's the goal here. You know, if somebody's trying to like really scale something and just make a boatload of money,
Yeah.
that's a good way to do it. You know, but I think it's pretty treacherous journey,
Yeah.
right? And once you sign the papers, now you've got other responsibilities and
Yeah.
you've got other voices in your company,
Yeah.
and
That can get that can get very destructive for the company and for the soul of the company. That's how I
Exactly.
describe it.
Yeah, it can be. And so that's why it's complex, because it's
Yeah.
really like both sides need to vet each other, right?
Yes.
If I'm looking for VC money, I need to really do my due diligence and vet, like, are these people in line with my goals
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the company and what I'm trying to accomplish and the culture and all
Yeah.
these kind of things. And that it's difficult because maybe they're not, but they're offering me the money.
Going from like we were talking about manufacturing, how you need a lot of money. Would you then recommend entrepreneurs to go to the more of the service side necessarily than the product side of things? Like I'm offering a service rather than I'm offering a product. Like, what?
No, not necessarily. But I think it's again, it's understanding what it takes to do it, and this is all part of like talking to people who've done it
Yeah.
or who are doing it, right? So getting an understanding of what it takes, and a lot of it is the people, right? So
Yeah.
if you want to develop a product, maybe you're great at designing it on conceptualizing it and working in CAD or whatever to kind of design a thing, but like you're terrible at building things, or you're terrible at marketing, or those kind of things, right? So it's finding and going, okay, I need help with this. Who are some good people, or who are what are companies that might be able to help me with this, right? And bringing in people who can complement what you do, so that you build this strong team that again are all aligned. But it's so I don't discourage kind of one or the other, but I think it's understanding kind of the pros and cons of it, right? If you want to go do digital stuff is way easier to do. So a lot of people are doing it, so there's a lot of noise.
Yeah.
So great if you want to do that.
There's
maybe
a lot more competition.
yeah, right. And so you got to be a lot better at marketing. You got to be a lot better at identifying a niche.
Yeah.
And that's, just understanding the game you're wanting to play.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any stories or anything of something that you've worked on that has become super successful, like something you're proud of maybe that you want to share?
Yeah. So we have this sort of most recent business. We have it's a digital curriculum for teaching entrepreneurship. And we positioned it for the college level. But, think of it like everything a professor would need to teach a class, right? But it's all digital. There's a lot of like AI infused into it. It's very, it's all digital so that we can be very adaptive and very kind of responsive to things, changing topics, bringing in new tools, all that kind of thing. And so we've got it. It's used at like 200 universities.
Wow.
And it was scalable pretty quick. Once we kind of figured out the basics and got some testing done and whatnot. And there's essentially like 4.5 people who are doing this, right?
Wow.
And it's going like gangbusters.
When you're developing that, like, are you closely working with like an AI developer in that? Because you said you infuse AI into it. I'm just curious about how's that process like?
Yeah, so me and another guy got introduced by a mutual friend, just because we were kind of doing similar things in different spaces. So he's a coder, he's a software or a programmer guy by trade, but he's also an entrepreneur, right? Yeah. And so he and I were kind of doing these similar things of teaching entrepreneurship, and he was in more of like a incubator, accelerator type space. I was in higher ed. So we kind of came together and we realized we had this shared kind of interest and passion in doing this. And we started to develop some things and started to put some ideas together about like, all right, we could put this curriculum together. There's a gap in the market, all this kind of thing. And then we brought on another guy who is a lot more of like the AI, brain, and bringing a lot of those elements into the company. Then we had an accounting person. We're like, oh, we gotta figure the books out, have somebody take care of the books, And so as we kind of grew and had these needs, then we go find somebody that's okay. We need this kind of expertise, and we need to vet them a little bit and make sure again they're competent, in what the skill is, but then also that they're going to work well with the team and vibe with the team and all that. So, it's been a fun journey. It's definitely the most successful one I've been involved with.
Yeah. How much time did it take to start this thing up, and how much time a week, how much time were you spending on it?
Yeah. It took a lot of time to start. Lots and lots of time to start. But a lot of that is really kind of going through the discussions and talking about like what should this thing be, and interviewing customers and figuring out like what really is the problem from their end and what do they need to kind of fill the gaps they have. So a lot of it was time spent doing that up front, right? And then now I don't spend a ton of time working on it now. I'm a little bit more in like doing some of the research stuff around it that we do, and helping out, with some blogging and kind of trying to build up the funnel of professors, because I'm the professor, like I'm the academic on the team, and so I have more legitimacy. So it's kind of like leveraging my position and my reputation. So at this point, I'm not doing as much, because now the tech side of it and building out the tech and making it more advanced, that's where a lot of the time and energy is spent.
So this is a successful story for you. Was there a time where you maybe had a failure, and what did you learn from that, and how did that lead maybe to help you in this successful entrepreneurial idea that you had?
Yeah, definitely. There was a previous company, and I think, we had a good idea, and we had validated it and all this kind of thing. And the short version of a long, messy story is the culture changed in the company because of other people who got brought in.
The soul change.
Yeah, and the sort of three of us that started it ended up that we weren't really on the same page in terms of kind of culture and some key things. And so it just all kind of blew up and came to an end. And, so that's when I figured out, like, it's really important to really spend time getting to know people and really be very transparent and authentic myself about here's why I'm doing this and here's what I want to get out of it. And here's what I believe and I don't want to do that. Here's the lines in the sand for me, right? And just being able to communicate that and really spend time. And so Justin, the first guy, he and I came together. We just spent a long time getting to know each other up front, right? To make sure, like, all right, if we're going to do this.
Are you guys like spending a lot of time together? Like, what is that? What do you mean by like getting to know each other? Like, how are you doing that?
Yeah, so we didn't physically meet each other for like 3 years, maybe. So he's out in California, and I'm here.
You're here. That's it's
so
a long way away.
So
different time zones and everything.
Yeah. So it's just hopping on Zoom, talking to each other, kicking things back and forth over email, and that was really it. But it's again sort of just having the conversation, right? Of like, what are you interested in? Like, who are you as a person, right? And seeing like, here's what interests me, and here's what kind of lights me up, and why am I doing this? And there's some similarities that the people on the team have of why we're doing this, but there's differences, where maybe my focus with this particular thing might be a little bit more of like, I want to make some money, right? And I want to do good, and I want to have an impact in the experience of college students, right? But maybe that's not my primary focus, whereas maybe his primary focus is this instead of, But we're all very transparent about it, and we get it, and we're all working together to accomplish the goals that we have.
You start a company there with a partner or a few partners, and there's some tension, some confrontation. What, from your experiences, how would you advise someone in dealing with that and navigating that?
Yeah, I think the part of it is spending the time building that relationship and vetting people ahead of time, right? And part of those conversations needs to be, okay, so when we hit this wall, right, and when we come to this we're just butting heads, like, what are some processes? How are we going to kind of figure this out, right? And part of it has to do with roles, where it's not necessarily that one person has the ultimate decision-making authority over this or that, but I have this expertise, you have this expertise. So if we're arguing over this thing and somebody else has the expertise and I necessarily don't, ultimately I'm probably going to defer to them, right? I'm going to push back, and I'm going to, make sure the conversation is had, but it's not to say that person has the decision without talking through things. Right. And because sometimes they have their expertise, but they also maybe don't consider these other things that are outside of their purview, right? Yeah. And so when the conversation happens and somebody else brings these things in, it might change their mind.
Yeah.
So it's doing that work ahead of time to make sure you can have those conversations and that you're going to be comfortable, right? Accepting constructive criticism and being challenged on your ideas, which isn't always the most comfortable thing to have that coming at you. And then just being transparent and it's basic, right? It's like being respectful and understanding this is more this person's lane. So ultimately, at the end of the day, they should probably have more say in that conversation because they're more of an expert in that thing. Yeah.
Do you have any book recommendations that you would recommend for an aspiring entrepreneur? Or you don't think that's necessarily useful?
I don't read a lot of books. Yeah. I would say...
Or maybe someone that you looked up to. Throw it out there, something like that. I always appreciated people like Richard Branson, like Gary Vee, people like that. And not always necessarily because of what they say or, anything like that, but looking at them and just saying, they had an idea, they wanted to accomplish something, they just went at it, right? And they were willing to try things, they were willing to fail at things, they learned from those, so they didn't just keep like doing the same thing over and over again. And I think as far as I can understand from
what gets out there publicly, like they treat people well,
Yeah.
right? They respect the people that are in their world. They want good things for the people that are investing in their vision and their ideas, right? And so just people like that I kind of run across instead of the, here's my private jet and here's my, like, I never got into those types of folks because that's not me, right? It's just not who I am or whatever. But I was like, well, okay, but what are you doing?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, what impact are you having, or how are you bettering people's experience? And I'm sure they are maybe in some way, right? But that's not what they put out.
Right.
So just those kind of people where, like, are they having positive impacts on other people aside from the product and the service or whatever they sell? But like, are they doing good things for people, for the world, that kind of thing?
Yeah.
And I think in terms of like books, podcasts, all that kind of like newsletters, people on LinkedIn, all that kind of thing, I think again it really depends on what it is you're trying to do, right? So I mean, if you're trying to build some digital products, well, there's certain resources that are more applicable to you than if you're trying to like build some robots.
Yeah, that's all. That's true.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, it's asking people who do that, asking people who live in that space, and you can ask them, what are the books you read? What are the blogs you subscribe to? What are the podcasts you listen to? Who are the influencers that you follow? And they're in that world, so they're going to know a lot more depth of those kind of things.
Do you have a favorite story of a John Carroll student that came through your entrepreneurship program that you're just proud of and have a successful story in any way like that?
Yeah, there's a couple, and they're sort of different, right?
Okay.
In terms of success, right? So Mason Beck is a guy who came through and he started side hustle kind of stuff in his dorm room with reselling stuff and collectibles and all this kind of thing, and he just bought a warehouse, makes a ton of money. He just did this thing on his own, right? And he brought in a couple other people, but he just kind of figured it out. And super humble guy, right? And again, I mean, he's doing good things for himself. He's very successful in the kind of ways that he wants to be successful. Like, he's selling collectible stuff. I would say that's not necessarily, like, in and of itself having a huge impact on people's lives, right? But some of the things he does and the ways he carries himself, he's able to leverage some of his success to do some good stuff, right? And so that's one in a little bit more of the traditional, entrepreneurship role. And then the other one is Maria Coughlin came through here and wasn't quite sure what she wanted to do, like most college students, right? I don't know, what do I do? And she really just kind of grew into herself and a lot of confidence in who she was and what she wanted to do. And she was one of those who, anytime I went to her and said, I got this opportunity, or you should go talk to this person, yes. The answer was yes, right? And she was just willing to, like, trust me. I mean, we had to build a relationship, but she was willing to trust me and other people in her life to say, we think this is going to be good for you, so you should do this, right? And, within reason, she said yes, right?
Yeah.
And she went, like, she did a year of service, and she was at Homeboy Industries out in California, working with them, and now she's trying to kind of figure out, okay, what's the next steps? But she's just such a good example of get to know who you are and get to know what's important to you and take advantage of opportunities that people put in front of you to grow and to build. And anytime opportunities come my way, and she graduated a couple years ago, but anytime opportunities come my way, she is always at the top of the list of, do you want to do this, right? Or here's somebody to meet, that kind of a thing. So, And again, so I mean, she's not an entrepreneur, right? I don't think she's ever going to be an entrepreneur. That's just not who she is. But the way that she approaches sort of developing herself and exploring what she wants to do in her life is a very kind of entrepreneurial way of doing it. And I would say she's extremely happy with how things are going.
Yeah. Do you think it takes a type of person to be an entrepreneur, like a certain type of personality?
I think so. I mean, it's you have to be a self-starter, right? You can't be somebody that just waits around to be told what to do.
You gotta
or
be self-disciplined.
You got to be a self-starter. You got to be self-disciplined. You have to be able to kind of multitask and manage all these different things and all that. I think you have to be very self-aware. So you got to know what you're good at and what you're not, that kind of thing. Unbelievable work ethic.
Yeah.
You get out what you put in, right? And I think just for the most part, it's you don't have to be like this extrovert, super outgoing salesperson kind of a thing, but you have to build relationships, and so you have to be good at interacting with people on some level, right? And you got to develop that skill. I think other than that, it really is, everybody kind of finds their lane, but so I think there's some basics, but otherwise it's just kind of trying things out.
Yeah. Any last messages that you want to give about entrepreneurship? Maybe something that you would want to, anything?
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. And I think, for college students, again, I mean, to me, reiterating and really encouraging students to kind of take a step back and say, this is going to be your journey.
Yeah.
Lots of people are going to have opinions. Your family's going to have opinions. Your advisors, teachers come your way. All these people are going to have opinions on you should do this or you should do this, right?
Yeah.
Including me. I mean, I have the same thing. At the end of the day, it's your journey, right? And so spending the time thinking about and trying to figure out, like, what is it that brings me meaning? And I tell kids this all the time. You're not going to invent a new job. I don't care what you come up with. Somebody does that, and somebody gets paid for it, right? And so understanding, like, what is it that brings me some meaning? And then finding people who do that and understanding their path to getting paid to do that and having a life doing that thing, right? And just investing in yourself in that way. And then once you have that, thinking about it, figuring out as you get opportunities that come your way, does this help me accomplish that? Does this help move me towards that goal, right? And if it does, then go all in. And if it doesn't, just don't do it, right? It sounds simple. I'm making it a little more simple than it should be, but I just think I get too many students who, spring semester, senior year, they're like, what do I do?
Yeah.
I don't know what I want. I don't know, and so it's like, well, you just had these 4 years.
Right.
You just kind of went with it, right?
Yeah.
Which is fine. But you have the gift of time to figure this out while you're in college, right? So I harp on that all the time with kids that I talk to.
Yeah, I think it's so important because you see it all the time, where just people get to that fourth year and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
What's the next step for me?
Yeah.
And that one of my biggest fears is the unknown. I'm a very structure-oriented person. My days all look the same. Like, I like to know what I'm doing all the time.
Yeah.
And so, like, and my dad raised me to be like that. My dad was very much like, this is what the plan for your life is going to be. I was like, okay. So I've been very structured, and I don't like the unknown. So I know what I was doing. I knew what I was doing when I came into college. I knew where I was going now, like after college, medical school. And then I know I want to be a doctor. I know this is what I want to do. I know where I want to live, like all these things. So whenever I have my friends who are like, I don't really know which way I'm going, it's just like, I can't comprehend that. And, like, I think there's a really big issue with college today, is that students, I think it applies both the way to the college themselves and the students themselves, is that, people come in saying, I don't know what I'm going to do. And if you're going into college not knowing what you're going to do, I don't think you should probably be going to college yet. I think there should be a gap period where you figure that out. Because you're just wasting time when you're in college. Because I know so many people who've taken 2 years of classes and be like, yeah, I don't know. I don't think this is what I want to do. I want to change my major. You just took
Right.
2 years of classes. You wasted 2 years of your time. You're young.
Yeah.
This is where you have the most energy.
Yep.
You're supposedly the most healthy you're supposed to be. And you just wasted time. And I try to emphasize that to a lot of people that I know.
Yeah.
And to myself too.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to waste time either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I mean, it's like you have to explore a little bit.
Yeah,
Right?
of
Because,
course.
and you're
Yeah,
young.
yes,
and you
of course.
kinda
And
figure
you're
things out.
more adaptable when you're young. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But I agree. It's like there are certain things that bring people joy or bring people meaning.
Yeah.
And I think too often young people don't necessarily look at those things as that could be a job. I
Yes.
could do that, for a job. I could, like, somebody would pay me to do that. And so they almost kind of discount a lot of that stuff, and they just kind of look at it and they go, well, I'm a, English major, or I'm a supply chain major, and so because I'm that major, I should do this, right?
Right.
And I always go, well, flip it and decide, this is what I want to do. What is it I can do here at a university
Yeah.
that's going to help me get there?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it's kind of, I think a lot of times it's done backwards.
Yes. It's 100%.
And different, again, back to an earlier point, it's like there's so many people giving students so many opinions.
Yeah.
And so
You have
that's
a lot
hard.
of people in your ear.
Yeah, so it's it's hard to sift through that and figure out, like, okay, who should I really be listening to and what makes the most sense. So it's difficult, and I think it puts a lot of pressure on young people to figure that out. But I think at the end of the day, taking the time to figure that out is
essential.
It's the best
Yeah.
thing you can do for
Right,
yourself.
right.
And reevaluating it.
Yeah.
Because if you figure it out, you think you figured it out when you were a freshman.
Probably
it'll
not
be
the
different.
case.
Yeah, right. It's gonna be different a year or two from now.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
but not waiting till spring semester senior
Yeah.
year to figure it out.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's more like my generation.
Yeah.
Last minute Lucy.
Dr. Winkle, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I
That was
really
a pleasure.
appreciate your time.
Yeah, no,
Thank you for watching this episode of the Toby Talks podcast. I just want to express my sincere gratitude to Dr. Winkle and his time. I really enjoyed the conversation. I thought it was fruitful. I thought I personally learned a lot, and I'm sure that means the audience did as well. And it was just a great conversation. So I just want to thank him for his time. If you enjoyed this conversation and learned something from it, I'd appreciate your like and subscription. And as always, thank you for watching, taking the time out of your day, and deuces.